Hey, welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and this is a continuation of the Venus playlist where I'm doing some recording some videos called Lessons from Venus. I am recording 40 plus lessons whilst Venus is retrograde in 2023 throughout the sign of Leo. So I don't know where I am in the scheme of things, to be fair, but we've looked at all aspects of attraction and the 7th house, the 5th house, etc., etc. And so what I wanted to do now, it just feels like it's time to actually study some real life couples, have a look at what was going on when people met the love of their life and also when they married them, and a little bit about their astrology together. So I'm going to be looking at just one couple in this video. I'm going to do the same with another couple tomorrow and another couple the day after that, to really sort of show some of the similar themes that show up. I mean, one thing you may well find is that actually there's nothing that special about the charts. Essentially, when you're meeting the love of your life or when something big is happening, what is always noticeable in astrology from my perspective is that there is a planet transiting one of your planets. So there's usually something going on to do with the current astrology compared to your own astrology. The next thing that I always notice is that there is usually an outer planet, like a slow moving planet moving into a really important place in your chart that has significance. And there's usually a couple of quick moving planets also impacting it. So, where I see just one important planet aspecting your chart, yes, I see change. But usually when you're meeting somebody as important as the love of your life, there's a few different indicators. And so I just wanted to explore that. The important thing is to recognize that I think is that, anyone can have good stuff happening in their charts, giving them the chance to have a relationship. Some people think that some people are the marrying kind and other people's aren't. And yes, some charts do seem to be better adapted to love, or better adapted to compassion, or better adapted to compatibility or compassion, or maybe they're a bit more easygoing, which makes it a lot easier. But we all have these moments in our chart where something is going through them in a sensitive place. So from that perspective, we all do get a fair crack of the whip. So let's have a look. So today's couple are a couple that they've been married for 20 years. They've just celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. I've known them for 7 years. And I admire them a lot. I really like them. They're a pair of coaches. And so you may well find that the communication between them and their ability to understand each other is one of their key factors in bringing them together. But anyway, what I'm going to do is look at, this is his chart, and this is showing what was going on the day that he met her. And then I'm going to do the same for hers, look at their compatibility charts, and then also look at what was happening on the day he married her and on the day that she married him. So hopefully it will give you some shared themes. And as this builds up, I think you'll notice that there are a couple of things that really stand out. Okay, so on the day that he met the love of his life, he had lots of planets going through the 7th house. And if you remember, the 7th house is the house of partnership. And so it's the house of long-term partnership. It's the house of, where your significant other might reside. The 5th house is also very important, but the 5th house is more about new things coming into your life. And of course, they've been married for 20 years. So, you would be looking for indications that maybe something significant was going to happen through the medium of his 7th house. But anyway, so he had lots of planets transiting his 7th, and they were Saturn, the Moon, Pallas Athena, and also Vesta. So they're not strictly what we would call the planets of the solar system, but I use them anyway. He also had Saturn in a conjunction with his descendant. Now, Saturn, I often find, is going over the angles at a fundamental time. In fact, tomorrow's couple, one of them has got Saturn going over the angle to do with the home, and the other has got Saturn going over the ascendant at the time of the wedding. Saturn is all about agreements and rules and regulations and contracts and stability and guidance and guidelines and things like that. And yeah, sure, Saturn does squash you somewhat. It does try to get you to conform. And in some ways, when you find yourself in a relationship, there is a certain amount of conforming or a decision that something significant is happening. And it's almost like the start of a contractual agreement. So it's interesting that at that time that he met the love of his life, that Saturn was going over this area, the descendant being one of the most important parts of the chart in terms of long-term romance. At the same time, he had Chiron crossing his ascendant. Now, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Like I said, he's a coach, and his lady love is a coach as well. So, understanding each other's hurts, understanding healing, understanding transformation are part of their stock and trade, and obviously really help to bring them together. Something else that was quite significant, I think, is also that Chiron was in a conjunction with Ceres. Ceres is the dwarf planet known for caring and nurturing and looking after each other. So obviously that's very important in terms of their relationship. Pluto is in a conjunction with his Venus. Now, you'll also see this in tomorrow's example with her chart. So Pluto right down here, which you can't quite see, it's just been covered up, but Pluto is transiting Venus. Now, Pluto moves very, very slowly. So it is the slowest moving planet. And as such, it really shows almost one of the most significant effects. When Pluto goes over something, it shows where we're yielding something, where we're giving up something often, and also where something very permanent could be happening, where a part of our ego dies. And of course, if you're going to fall in love with somebody, that's also a possibility, that you are giving up a part of yourself because there is something much bigger to trust in. So that's significant. Now you'll see these little A's and then this S. I've put those in just to get you more familiar with the terms. So for instance, Saturn conjunct his descendant, it's approaching, it's coming into the conjunction. Saturn's actually retrograde at the time he met his lady love. So it's coming back into a conjunction. So it's coming in, it's approaching. In terms of Venus conjunct his Uranus. So at the time he met her, Venus up here is in a conjunction with his Uranus. She's actually separating. So she's actually had the conjunction, but it's still typically in a conjunction, and it's separating. So the energy of love and sudden awareness of somebody is definitely there. Last of all, also, we've got Juno conjunct his Saturn, and that's approaching. So it's a strong aspect. It's coming in. What's significant about that is you may remember in the sexual planets 1 and 2, I mentioned that Juno is known as the goddess of marriage. So she's quite important, I think. And in fact, in tomorrow's example as well, there's a bit of Juno-Saturn action. So Juno, the goddess of marriage, and Saturn about binding contracts or coming together in an agreement. So again, there's that implication. And then finally, we've got Neptune and Uranus going through his 5th. So it's obviously a significant time. The 5th house is about romance. In fact, Neptune and Uranus are not a million miles away from his Mars. And Mars and Neptune are being sexual planets. So there's a lot of activity there. Also, I think the last thing that I didn't mention is also the Sun is approaching Pluto. Again, it's a quick aspect. It's not long lasting, but it's showing that something is going on. And now I also see Ceres, to do with nurturing somebody, is also right over his North Node, showing that he may be about to go on a caring journey, that his karma might suddenly expand to more of a nurturing position. So quite significant. Okay, so this was the day she knew that he was the one that was just the most important chart to do for her, not rather than the one where they met, where some of this was already in play, but this seems to me to be the most important chart. So in this chart, First of all, the Moon and Ceres are transiting her 7th. Like I said, this is a coaching and caring relationship. So Ceres, to do with nurturing, is there. Jupiter is right going over her ascendant, which is often a time of our expansion. It's usually showing a certain amount of well-being. Jupiter is also in a conjunction with her Mars, which is fascinating. Like, Mars is also the ruler of her relationships. And so Jupiter coming into Mars like that is really helpful. Venus is conjunct her Saturn, and it's applying. I said approaching first. Applying is usually the term we use. The Sun is also in between her Neptune and Juno. So it's separating from Juno and applying and approaching her Neptune. Ceres, I've already said, is in the 7th, but what's also significant about Ceres is that the North Node is also going over Ceres in her chart, showing again the nurturing element of their relationship. And then she's got this interesting little thing here. So Saturn is in between her Moon and Jupiter in her 4th house, which is to do with like changing her life, and living together and stuff, which I know they did quite soon after. And Saturn is retrograde, so it's applying to her Moon, and then soon after would have been going direct and applying to Jupiter. So that's kind of interesting. And then there's also some interesting Pallas connections. So Pallas Athena to do with patterns and ability to be cool and strategic, which I think really comes up in things like coaching relationships, where language is involved and noticing patterns and psychology and stuff. So at the time, Mercury and Mars were right over Pallas Athena, and then Pallas Athena was in a conjunction with Saturn in a conjunction with her Moon. So that seemed very, very strong. But the thing I think is the strongest is like Jupiter going over her ascendant, the Sun coming into a conjunction with her Neptune, and Venus coming into a connection with Saturn. It's obviously a very significant time for her. So here's a quick look at their composite chart. So this is where you put one person's chart and compare it to another, and you find the midpoint of their Sun, their Moon, all the angles, etc., etc., and it draws up a picture of their relationship. So this represents their relationship, and one of the things, again, which really comes out is that Ceres is really important. This idea of nurturing each other and being present for each other and really being there for each other's issues and sensitivities and really caring. It's really like a parental role together. And so Ceres is in a very tight conjunction with the Sun, and Neptune is also there as well. So Neptune is a sexual planet, but it's also very romantic, and it's very, it's boundaryless, it's unbounded. There we go. And, in that conjunction with Ceres, it's absolutely wanting to go to the nth degree to look after each other and to support the relationship. And the Sun is there as well. So their personality within the relationship has a personality of caring for everyone and everything that comes into contact with it. They've got Mars and Chiron together in the sign of Sagittarius, which I think is quite philosophical, giving them quite the ability to deep dive into feelings and pain and get to the root of it. We've got this connection between Saturn and Venus, which is showing a deep level of loving commitment. Pallas Athena and Pluto are in a tight conjunction, and they're in a lovely trine to the Moon, and the Moon is connected to the North Node, so that seems very good. Juno, the goddess of marriage, she's in a conjunction with Uranus, showing that it's an unusual union. How they respect each other is really unusual, according to how most other people do it. But essentially the ruler of this chart is both Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune's in a conjunction with the Sun, and Neptune and the Sun are in a lovely trine to Jupiter, and Jupiter's in the 5th. This is a very romantic, caring, self-sustaining, resourceful relationship where there's nothing they won't do for each other. It's really beautiful. Their synastry, then, that's where you're comparing one person's chart to the others to see what's happening. First thing that really strikes me is their Neptunes are exactly in the same place. Now, they're born 2 years apart. So Neptune, his Neptune would have continued, would be further along, but has actually reversed back. It's gone retrograde. And so unusually they're exactly in the same place. Similarly, their Plutos are very much in a similar place, but you find this with people born in the same year, not normally a couple of years apart. There's usually a bit more of a gap. The next thing that I notice is we've got this lovely moon trine Neptune aspect. So look, there's the moon in his chart in a trine to her Neptune and his own Neptune, which is very strong and very, very romantic. Chiron conjunct Ceres. So this is, there's Ceres here, and there's his Chiron. Chiron is wounded healer. Ceres is the need to nurture. So, his need to heal and his need to come to terms with himself is met by her absolutely unbreakable, loving, nurturing stance. Very motherly and very, very helpful. Venus, where's Venus? Venus and Uranus in a conjunction are in opposition to Jupiter. Now, this will put a bit of a fly in the ointment every now and again, as will Saturn in opposition to Jupiter. That will sometimes give them a little bit of like push and pull between staying put and expanding, which I think they would probably both laugh at if they heard me say that. But this need to have an adventure, this Venus-Uranus connection is really strong. There's this really strong need to have an adventure and also to show up. And sometimes they are pulling them in different directions as well. But there's so many beautiful, strong things here that they're always able to work it out. I actually think the best relationships do have quite a bit of grit in them, so that so that you grow. Because if you're not growing, like what's happening? I see in the charts of people that don't grow together, that they just kind of fade away, and they like, where's the relevancy? I think a good relationship has relevancy to each person. Sun, Mercury, sextile Jupiter. So there's a Sun Mercury here in a sextile to Jupiter, which is very nice, aiding communication between them. Ceres conjunction Mercury. Where is that? There we go, Ceres and Mercury. So again, talking about their feelings, being able to be free about that. And then we've got this Moon Jupiter conjunction on the descendant. There we go. So there's his descendant, which is to do with his partners, and she's got the moon on one side and Jupiter on the other, which is again very much attractive to people. So let's have a quick look at what was going on the day that they got married. So you can see there's a bond there, and the flavor of the bond is very much about nurturing, about talking, about listening to each other, about being present for each other, and a lot of unconditional regard for each other. It's very, very respectful, very beautiful. So on his wedding, and I should also say that in partners that find it a bit easier to fall in love, and in partners who have maybe married once or twice before, the subsequent weddings don't show up as strongly usually as the first or second, purely in the same way as what I've observed in terms of astrology. Like, the first child you have usually really resonates with your child, and subsequent children, they come along, and yes, they do show up in your chart in some way, but not as strongly. And why is that? Because the firstborn is the one that changes you from being not a parent to being a parent. The arrival of the first child is significant. Similarly, I think, when the arrival of the true love or the first marriage really shows up usually, and if it's a subsequent relationship, it will still show up as significant, but possibly not as significant because they've already gone through the process of being married before, even if it wasn't quite right. It just shows that they've got a better aptitude to find themselves in loving and committing relationships. So anyway, on his wedding day, Venus is right over his ascendant and in a conjunction with Ceres. So again, there's another sort of indication. This is a healing relationship. Venus is there. It's love, and it's changing his identity, because the ascendant is very much about the identity. Chiron is in a conjunction with his Saturn, showing that something really big is happening. Where's his Chiron? Oh, there it is. In the first house, which again is about the identity. So Chiron, like his wounds are possibly supported now. He's got a partner in crime that's committed to the expression of any wounds and things. Juno is conjunct his Neptune. As I said, Juno represents, she's the goddess of marriage. Now it's in a separating conjunction with Neptune, but I mean, they didn't just get married. Obviously they were planning it, and so that would have been coming in as this was coming in. North Node and Pluto are in a conjunction to his Venus in the fourth. Sorry about the dog in the background. So where is that? North Node and Pluto just down here are in a conjunction with her Venus. The North Node is separating from her Venus, and Pluto is applying to it. So it's a very, very strong thing. So this is another sort of Pluto-Venus thing. And you'll see this in my next episode, where that's true of one in the couple. We've also got Neptune and Uranus in the fifth, conjunct the vertex. Now, the vertex is a sort of mathematical point that is calculated through the chart, and it represents what the universe wants for you to express. So on the day, like the sort of like point of what you should be doing is connected to Uranus, which is about a fresh new start, and Neptune, a deeply romantic and fresh new start. So it's really, I love that. Saturn is also going through his seventh, showing, the commitment. Obviously, when he met her, it was going over his descendant, and by the time they get married, it's still in the seventh house. And then finally, Mercury and Ceres is conjunct his Uranus. So his Uranus is here, and there's Mercury and Ceres. Isn't that lovely? And then let's have a look at her wedding day. And it shows up very deeply, for sure. Juno, the goddess of marriage, is in a conjunction with her Neptune, so it's very romantic and dreamy, and it's also in a conjunction with her ascendant, and it's also in a conjunction with Mars, and Mars is the ruler of her seventh house. Chiron is conjunct her Saturn, which was also happening for her husband. Now hers is I say it's separating. It should actually say it's applying, but it's coming in. The Sun is conjunct her Venus and Uranus. So there it is. The Sun has literally just gone past it. And Venus is in a conjunction with Mercury as well, and also just separating from a conjunction with Pluto. So there's a Pluto-Venus conjunction there as well. So, one of the things that I think is quite significant, and we've seen in a couple of charts now, is the importance, I think, or how Saturn shows up on an angle often. Sometimes Saturn shows up in a conjunction with the Sun or the Moon, showing that something is being formalized, something is coming in. Pluto and Venus showing up together is really quite beneficial. And Juno, what is she connecting to? So there's a lot going on. I hope you found that useful and sort of entertaining, I guess. It's important not to use this as a stick to beat yourself with. Like if you're looking at your chart and you're looking and you can't see any outer planets coming up into connections with things, that I could see that could be a little bit dismaying. But to be fair, we're always going to have times when the outer planets are coming into view with things. And you'll also notice that the quicker moving planets like Venus, Juno moves fairly fast. Like I think it's every 3 months she's changing signs, something like that. So they're giving you an opportunity. Jupiter changing signs every year is also creating a bit of change. So there's always going to be a time when new relationships are being formed, and also, we have the opportunity to connect in those ways should we wish to take them. So anyway, I hope that was helpful, and hopefully see you in the next one where I look at another couple. And I'm going to give you a heads up. This couple is actually me and my husband. But, I think I'm looking at everybody else's chart. It's only fair that I put myself in some scrutiny. So check us out in the next one and learn a little bit more about a different theme of relationship. This, like the one we just looked at, is all kind and caring and nurturing, and not to say ours isn't, but you'll see it's got a different theme altogether.